Hello friends, I made this for. My name is Lauren, and today I want to talk about some more toxic spirituality. But before I do so, I do want to give a big disclaimer. Some of what I'm going to say might be triggering to some folks. If you might be triggered by the topic of SA, sexual trauma, those sort of things, definitely skip this video. But if you are a person who is trying to deconstruct toxic spirituality or maybe bring some awareness to certain concepts in spirituality that are toxic, buckle up, because today's video is kind of a part 2 to the purity culture cult video that I made a while back. And in fact, this is my second attempt to make this video. But with the topic being about sexual purity and how that's pervasive, why it might be such a hot topic in the spiritual community, as well as why it is problematic, definitely requires a little bit more nuance than I gave the last time I tried to talk about this topic. So if you've never been here before, hi, hello, my name is Lauren. I am a spiritual small business owner. I usually talk about tarot and astrology, but today it's all about toxic spirituality, because as a small business owner in a spiritual space, we got to call out some of the problems that are in our own sphere of influence, yeah? And of course, if you've already been here, you're a returning subscriber. Hi, hello, welcome back. Please remember that these are in my shop. Shop link is in my link tree down below. So let's start with the first one. What is this kind of toxic spirituality, and where is its roots? So this toxic spirituality, this aspect of it, falls into the purity culture thing, as I said before. In that video, I talked about the purity of food, purity of thoughts, purity of relationship. But the thing I forgot to mention, but also it requires its own video to be honest, is the topic of body purity. What does this look like in where you might have noticed it before? Red tent circles, Yoni cleansing, Yoni Reiki, Yoni eggs. And let me just stop right there and say I have done work around my sexual trauma that was indeed very spiritual and included work such as Yoni eggs, included certain things. So I'm not trying to yuck your yum if that's kind of the thing that you're using as a modality to support yourself during something that's very traumatic. That is something I just want to make very clear. There are so many different roads to healing, but what I am worried about, the thing that fucking grinds my gears and ultimately is problematic, are folks that are grifting people using this rhetoric. Those grifters are more often than not looking to make a buck, looking to sell a course, looking to sell a service. And as I said before about the honest grifter, a lot of people truly believe in what they are trying to sell you. But if you go back to that video, and I'll link it at the end, if you notice any of the red flags that I shared in that video, such as a high price tag, only I can heal you, I have it all figured out, that is predatory behavior. And if you see it happening around these spaces where people are offering healing for your body and your sacred divine femme temple, run the fuck away. As I said before, there are many different ways to heal your trauma, and people gravitate towards certain modalities. But if you're noticing the conversation around a modality being, only I know how to heal you, I've been through this and I know the way, and again, that high price tag, that's a grifter. That's an honest grifter who really thinks that they can heal you, but probably doesn't have the trauma-informed healing practitioner work in order to actually support you. So, as always, I will say this. I go to therapy, I take medication, I also do breath work, I also do yoga. I do these things in tandem with Western medicine because that works for me. A lot of us will be scared or pushed off using Western medicine, and thus we will search out alternatives. Today's video is really just to make you aware of how some of these things can be utilized by grifters, but also how some of these narratives are actually doing more harm than good. So with that said, some of these grifters will talk about the divine femme and the divine masculine, and how these two beautiful things come together and are just perfectly made to fit together. But because we are so different, there can be energy exchange that lowers our vibration or lowers the vibration of our womb. I have a whole video about the low vibe lie, so we already know how I feel about that shit. But based on what I just said, we can really see that some of this can be tied, some of this is influenced by actual Christian purity culture that's very pervasive in America. So to give some context, I grew up Southern Baptist in the state of Texas, where purity culture is definitely a hot commodity. Though I never had a purity ring or signed a purity pledge to my dad or parents, which if you've never heard of those things, a purity pledge or a purity ring, that shit is so toxic. Virginity is a construct. It's not fucking real. And making men or women or any individual believe that they have to save themselves in order to be pure for marriage and therefore have a good marriage is super toxic, super problematic, and is its own video. But this pervasiveness of purity culture in the Christian zeitgeist, I think, is where we see this overlap from spiritual folks to Christian folks and vice versa. The hippie to Christian pipeline is its own video that I do plan on making. So for those of you who've never heard of that, there will be time. We're talking about the purity culture cult around specifically femme bodies is what I want to focus on because I personally have experience on that. But that's not to say that this purity culture and complementarism, which again, complementarism is its own video that's coming out soon, if it's not already out actually. These things are super problematic. So make sure to watch those videos as well if you want to get a deep dive into why these things are such a fucking issue. But also they are their own issue. So that's basically where this purity concept comes from. It's definitely pseudo-Christian folks who have gone spiritual and are now using that same ideology to kind of bring in their new spiritual self. And this can be a two-way road. This same spiritual concept of low vibration or purity of the womb and basically cleansing the womb, as it were, can lend itself well to Christian purity, and Christian purity can allow us to get to that certain place as well. So what does this look like on the surface in spiritual communities? Well, as I said before, it can be talked about as the vibrational aspect. We can see this as the divine feminine talk, that again, that complementarism is super exclusive. It does not include the rainbow of human experience and really forces anyone who's femme into this very finite box of what relationships look like, and pretty much just ignores the fact that gay relationships even exist. It's gay erasure in a very pure way, which is so weird, because it's obvious that the intention behind this ideology is not to erase gay people, but it simply has no expansiveness outside of cis heteronormative relationships. And so on that note, a lot of what I will say moving forward about what is toxic here is going to be super cis heteronormative. So I'm just going to refer to it as divine feminine, she, her pronouns when referring to Yoni cleansing. But please know that so many people fall in the spectrum of human experience. There's intersect people that are totally being ignored in this conversation. Trans people, again, very TERF energy, just ignoring that they exist or saying that it's not real. And 3, homosexual relationships are just not present. And of course, don't even get me into the non-binary erasure that is in the spiritual community. Spiritual community is still coming around to it, and I swear to God it will happen. It's just going to take a little time. So we all might have seen it. The concept of the red tent. Again, a very femme space that's non-inclusive for the most part. There's exceptions to every rule, but I will say, generally speaking, it's just not inclusive. It's not. We don't love to see non-inclusivity. There's a lot of talk about how, in these spaces, your womb holds energy. Now, this is not to say that this is totally wrong, because as someone who gets stressed out and does yoga, I notice when I'm holding more tension in my hips. So there's definitely something to be said about how we as womb owners might hold energy. Or we might hold on to tension in that part of our body a little differently. But what I find really problematic in these spaces is the talk around how you have to, 1, limit your partners because everyone you have sex with rubs off on you and in you, and then you hold a part of them forever and ever or however long. And 2, that you want to make sure that how you engage with your partner is the most high vibrational possible, or you're not really getting the most out of your tantric sexual experience. So that might sound a little problematic on the surface, right? It's not all the way problematic just on its face, but how it's marketed is super weird and super culty. I see a lot of spiritual people coming out and talking about how the divine femme and masc are so perfectly designed for each other. Like 2 different shapes that overlap to make one perfect design. Now, this isn't to say that this concept isn't poetic or beautiful, but when it's displayed as the default, it becomes, again, exclusionary. And if we want to raise vibration or move to 5D consciousness, not including everyone is not how we do it. It just simply isn't. This concept can also create a shame spiral for folks. So saying that everyone you have intimate relationships with is with you always can be super triggering to someone who has had a history of sexual abuse, SA, those different things. Please, if you know someone who's been through this kind of trauma, being hyper aware of what you might say to them might trigger memories or anxieties is really important. And what I find with a lot of these talks is that this could be super triggering conversations for someone who's been through that sort of violence. So, what can we do instead? Well, I think some of the conversation about you don't want to hold your ex-partner's shadow, or they can be tied to you through your womb. These conversations often put the emphasis on the women's, femmes' wombs and how they are just sucking up that energy and not letting go. This can create an internalized shame spiral that causes that person to then look for resources outside of themselves that are not necessarily therapeutic, or at least not guaranteed therapeutic. Anyone can take an online class and say, I'm a certified womb coach. I'm a certified this, that, and the third. But will they really be able to give you the support a person needs in a moment of sexual or health crisis? I just very much doubt it. Again, I understand why folks might want to look outside normal Western medicine for alternatives that can spiritually support folks besides just talking it out. But what really worries me with these grifters and spaces specifically geared towards Yoni healing or womb healing is there's so much emphasis on this idea that we as womb owners just hold all this energy that has to be cleansed out. Otherwise, it could manifest as a physical illness. That is super exploitative and is one way to force folks to pay into programs that don't actually do anything because people are afraid of getting sick. This goes back to my other video about purity, where when we focus on having super pure, organic, non-GMO food, we are putting people who don't have access to certain resources in positions of othering, where it's like, well, there's nothing you can do, I guess. You have to shell out hundreds of dollars for organic, non-GMO foods, or you're going to get sick and die young. There's so much in that is so fear-based. And again, that reminds me of growing up evangelical, worried that because of sin in my life, I would miss the rapture. I have so much anxiety because of that. So, again, the overlap between Christianity and the spiritual community, it's basically the same. Always has been, always will be. It just has a different dress. It's the same person though. Just dressed up in a different outfit. So one thing that we can do is acknowledge that yes, our body does store trauma. That's very real. And in fact, there's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score. That's a Audible book that I've been working through for a few years and I highly recommend if you've never read it. It can give you some context on how the body holds trauma and in its different ways. But the way that concept is used in spiritual spaces to almost exploit people for money, I don't like it and it needs to fucking stop. Instead, take control back. There are many ways that you as the individual can explore healing modalities for your body. And again, not to yuck anyone's yum, but you as the person don't always need a practitioner to show you the way. Sure, there can be really great workshops and things to take, but it goes back to this. Is the person that's helping you encouraging you to do this work without them? Is this person trying to keep you captive and charge you a high rate that is difficult for you to pay? is this individual or group trying to get you to join more and more so that you can be a part of their community? Now, I have a community online. It's my Patreon, link down below. But the idea is it's a sliding scale. You don't have to really invest that much to join that community. And you get to pick what works for you. I'm also never going to tell you that I have all the answers, because that would be disingenuous and that would be preying upon your most vulnerable needs. So if you are someone who is doing womb work, if you are someone who is looking to work through very real, very impacting trauma, my concern is only that you are not being exploited by folks who claim to have all the answers. Because in healing, there's no one size fits all. You are not inherently broken, impure, or sullied because of relationships or things that have happened to you. You are not inherently wrong. You are not inherently bad. If there are things that you desire to do for your healing, I ultimately don't want to shame you. But I also don't want you to feel that you have to do something in order to be purified before being able to move forward. Ultimately, all of us have our own paths to healing. And when it comes to very real, very extreme trauma, we have to listen to our hearts, our bodies, and our minds delicately, softly, and with so much grace. How we move forward through trauma is very individual. And it can be done with support of professionals. But be wary of professionals that claim to be able to pull out energetic vampires from your womb. The chances are it's a scam. They want to get money out of you. So with that said, I hate to leave it on that, but just be aware. Be aware of where these might be, where it might actually be coming from, and notice for yourself. Do any of these things create tension in your body? Do any of these actually feel disempowering as concepts, where you feel less empowered to do your own healing and instead need a guru to support you? I hope this was helpful. In a time where a lot of us are going through collective and individual trauma, there will always be grifters who have perhaps good intentions, but not the education to truly support what you're going through. Always be wary, always be open, but always listen to your own knowing first. You can trust yourself. I 100% believe that. So on that note, please take care of yourselves, drink water. Again, if you want to connect with me more, links are in my link tree along with my store to get your Happy Pluto Return shirt. I'll be doing some more Pluto Return videos soon. But until then, your womb is beautiful just the way it is. Don't be afraid of what you've been through. And don't fall for any of these grifters. And if you do, it's okay, I promise. It happened to me too. I have a whole video about the honest grifter. It happened to me too. It's okay. Don't be ashamed. But with that said, I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.